I was a clubster. You know what you do in clubs, right? You listen to music, right? You listen to people that sit behind places to make up beats, right? Now one day I was going to a church, and back in the club there was a certain song that they used to like to see me dance off of, right? I know the beat to the song. I know the song, right? But one day I went to a church, and the church had the same beat inside the house of God. Now remember now, God says, take off your shoes, for the place whereon you standing is holy ground, right? Now when I was in the club, that was not holy ground. Demons reign there. Now what's happening today is people are taking that same beat, that same music that they use to worship and glorify the enemy, they'll bring it into the house of God. But look what the Bible says in Psalms 96 verse 9. The Bible says, "Oh, worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Fear before him all the earth." When we worship God, we must worship God in the beauty of holiness. We worship a holy God where there is no darkness in our God. There is no sin in our God. There is no mixture of light and darkness with our God. There is no sin mixed up in the worship of God, because our God is a holy God. So therefore, we will worship God. We must worship him in beauty of holiness. Right? And we ought to worship God in spirit and in truth. And what's happening today is people, they say they have the spirit, but where's the truth? Right? Right? Now, let's go to another, Exodus chapter 20. We're going to look at verse 20. Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20, we're going to look at verse 8. Now, remember now, we're talking about a God who is holy, who have called us to be holy, right? He called us to watch our conversations. He called us to worship him in the beauty of holiness, right? So wherever God has blessed, wherever God has made holy, we ought to keep it holy, right? That sounds reasonable, because what we want to do is we want to get to God a reasonable sacrifice, right? Now let's look at Exodus chapter 20. We're going to look at verse 8. Now, this is something that is very controversial, even in the Christian world, right? Even where people profess to follow God. Now, look what the Bible says in Exodus chapter 20. The Bible says, remember. Now, when I was coming up, many of you know that when your mother told you to remember, right? You better remember. I remember my mother told me to wash a pot of rice. And guess what? I didn't remember. And when she came home, she smelled something burning. And guess what? I got a whipping. Right? Because I didn't remember. I forgot. Right? Now look, the Bible says, now remember now, let's go back up to verse 1. We're going to look at verse 1 so you can get a picture who is the one that's speaking. Look at the verse 1 of chapter 20 of Exodus. The Bible says, and God, who did I say? And God. And God spake all these words. How many of these words did God speak? All these words. Now let's listen to the words that God spoke. Look at verse 8. The Bible says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. God says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Nowadays, men want to take the Sabbath and nail it to the cross and forget about the same God that told us to keep this day holy. Don't that sound contradictory? Now, a holy God told us to keep a day holy, but men have forgotten to keep God's Sabbath holy. Now, what day is it? Look at the Bible. Look what it says. Look at verse